The session is about to start. Please take your seats.
الجلسة على وشك أن تبدأ. يرجى الجلوس في مقاعدكم.
I'm sorry? You can do as you please, but I think we'll be all right. I mean, I'm going to be really short. So. Can we? I think I got a podium mic too if it's on. Yeah. You want me to call us to action? Great. Cool. Welcome. Hello, everybody. You're ready to get started. Awesome. My name is Chris Rowe. I'm the director of Worldwide Carbon at Amazon. There we go. Great. And on behalf of the Climate Pledge, really excited to welcome you all today. It's a really important conversation. Amazon co-founded the Climate Pledge in 2019 with global optimism. If you haven't heard of the Climate Pledge, there's a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And we're really excited to say that we have over 450 companies representing 38 industries and over 50 countries represented in this community of folks that are really all trying to figure out how do we decarbonize and get to net zero. And so this discussion today around the supply chain, data transparency is a critical component of that. We've, at the Climate Pledge, have been a supporter of this pact work since day one, and we're really excited to feature some of this work today and learn more about it and hear from some company use cases. I'm here with Anna, our leader for today from the World Business Council of Sustainable Development. We also have John Kreitz with RMI, Daniel Schmidt with SAP, and John Power from Schneider Electric. So really excited to be with you all today. And with that, Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I hope you can hear me. I'm not quite sure whether the mic is on or not. No? Could we put the mic on, please? I need to talk up? Oh, okay. So could we have the mic, please? Thank you so much. Yes. So welcome to this discussion. Really delighted to be co-hosting together with the Climate Pledge. I'm Anna. I co-lead the climate work at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And we really wanted to take the opportunity today to talk a little bit about the how on data transparency, moving the conversation really away from the scope 3 data is important to how can we actually get to better granularity and maybe also why. As was already said, we have some great speakers lined up to join us here on stage today. But I wanted to start by baselining us a little bit about, sort of where data transparency comes in and how it really feeds into the broader system. So I'm going to share a little graph here, and some of you might have seen this before. WBCSD just launched the CPAS, a sort of CEO guide for the climate-related corporate performance and accountability system. It's a bit of a mouthful, but this is one of the graphs taken from the CPAS work. And really what it's designed to showcase is that progress that companies need to be making and the journey that companies undergo across the different steps of understanding your baseline, setting your target, accounting for your emissions and then disclosing them properly. And it's really sort of, we heard a little bit from Chris around the Climate Pledge, which comes in this journey, and PACT, the work on the Partnership for Carbon Transparency, also comes in really around the how you actually understand your emissions, the footprint of the products that you are producing and creating. And to give you some stats around this, there was an Accenture report recently, and it has sort of highlighted that a lot of companies aren't actually on track to meet their targets. 70% of emissions sit in the supply chain, and the biggest buckets of those emissions are your purchased goods and services and the use phase. So if you don't understand the impact that your products are creating, if you don't really get to, in a very pragmatic way, for the heaviest hitting products, you understand where the footprint lies, you're not able to take carbon-informed decisions. You don't know which suppliers to work with to decarbonize. You don't know how to choose between two products. You cannot decide where to innovate. And most importantly, in a way, you also cannot hold yourself accountable for the progress that you're making over time. So that's what today's conversation is going to be focusing about, all in the context of some of the work we've been doing in the Partnership for Carbon Transparency at WBCSD. And we launched an implementation program in PACT at the beginning of the year to move us towards more consistent and granular and comparable data in the value chain. And I just wanted to highlight some of the key stats from this program before we hear from some of the participants, because they've really sort of, to me, it was incredible to see. We had about 1,000 companies engaged, 1,350 product carbon footprints shared, and most importantly, and the biggest sort of, shocker for me was the variance in the data. So there's a 40%, approximately 40% variance in the data if you're using secondary data or you're using primary data. So you might be 40% off. You might be investing your money in the wrong place to decarbonize. So that's a little bit what we're going to focus our conversation on today, why it is so important, but also most importantly, how you are going to get there. So as Chris was already mentioning, we have a sort of great insights from different companies here today. We'll hear a little bit from SAP, we'll hear a little bit from Schneider Electric on their work around getting to and supporting more granular data. And then we'll be joined by John and by Chris, and we'll have a discussion on what this actually means in practice and what opportunities this can unlock. Before we go into that discussion, there are all sort of papers and little like post-its or pens. We will ask you at the end, what is your key takeaway? And what open questions do you still have? So start thinking about that, because you're not going to get away that lightly today. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Daniel to the stage to give us some insights on what SAP has been doing in this space. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Anna. I was a little bit depressed because my favorite soccer team lost last night, but I just joined the plenary session with Al Gore. And his entire speech was about data and the facts, and now I'm back on an optimistic emotion. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. I would like to inspire you to take action based on data. Let me first talk very briefly on why I'm proud not having a sustainability strategy at SAP. Stay tuned. And then following by sharing a little bit of our own greenhouse gas emission reduction journey, and then most importantly about why I'm so proud that we are engaged in PACT in the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. So let me start with the first aspect, why I'm proud not having a sustainability strategy. Because I'm so proud that we have a sustainable business strategy, starting with our purpose of helping the world run better and improving people's lives. Our vision is to enable each and every organization and each and every network to be an intelligent, sustainable one. And then we have defined 3 pillars: business agility, resilient supply chains, and sustainability. And sustainability drives as well agility and being resilient. SAP needs to fulfill 2 roles. One is doing our homework internally, and that leads me to the second topic. When it comes to our own greenhouse gas emission reduction journey, that was back 15 years ago. We came out with our first reduction target to be in 2020 back to 2000 levels. And we were 4 times bigger in 2020 compared to 2000. And we came up with an absolute target. And from the very first beginning, it was about Scope 1, Scope 2, and 6 selected emission sources out of Scope 3. And to be honest, and that was a key learning, of course, the data accuracy, the data quality was not yet there. But if you don't start, you will never get there. Yeah, you need to bring up the quality and you need to bring down your emissions. So that was fantastic that we were bold enough, even not having yet a great data set and data pool, to be on that journey. And through that journey we learned, like being innovative and creative. So we introduced internally back in 2015 a price on carbon in a very simple way, not per ton, just per flight ticket. And whenever a colleague like Alicia sitting here in the room, when you're in a plane, Daniel gets money and being empowered to invest in reduction of carbon emissions. That leads me to the third and final and most important part, why I'm so proud to be engaged in PACT. Because, as Anna just outlined, on average, most of the emissions are in Scope 3, and we are not in an ideal world, because not every company has Scope 1 and Scope 2 under control. That is why we need to look at Scope 3, and we need to make informed decisions. The foundation, the basis of that is that we contributed from a methodology, content perspective, but as well from a technical specification perspective. Both elements are needed in order to create a foundation where all the stakeholders, all the involved companies, all the players in that game are trusting in each other data. That is the foundation, methodology, content, and the technical specification. And through that, we as well, and you have seen on the screen the companies going across various sectors. That is another very important topic, that we do not come up with different sector-specific standards, but really using PACT, helping together for sustainability in the chemical business. In the steel business, there's that alliance, RIM, I believe is it called, or with Catena X in the automotive industry. And having that standard, content-wise, but as well from a technical perspective, that allows to treat at the end carbon emissions like money. And we are talking about big money when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, and that is why it's needed to treat it as money. We at SAP are quite well known for accuracy when it comes to financial data. Yeah, we manage the financial flows, the material flows. So embedding now sustainability data like greenhouse gas emissions in our data models, that allows that you have these data in the business process. That allows that you can make informed decisions connecting the financial and the non-financial world, which is super important. Thank you for listening, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing that. And we'll be, yes, let's give Daniel a round of applause. We'll be hearing from you a little bit later on sort of some more of the details here. And of course, we have RMI with us here today. Lots of acronyms, so it's a little bit complicated. We like acronyms in the WBCSD world. Next, I'd like to invite John to come and share a little bit more on what Schneider Electric is doing. John, I'll give you the clicker. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Tough to follow that one, Daniel. Excellent presentation. But want to talk a little bit about what Schneider Electric is doing, why we're interested in being involved in PACT, what we've done with some of the initial product carbon footprinting work. But to start with, I'll give a little bit of a background on Schneider Electric as a company, who we are, what we're focused on, and how we're both with our own company usage and emissions.
It's not really working, so I'm just going to give you this now.
Some of these challenges, but also working with customers at the same time. So Schneider, as I mentioned, we're, for those who don't know us, many will probably know us, Global 500 company based in Paris, France. We're really trying to lead ESG by example in our own ecosystem. So this is how do we look at our own emissions. We've had emissions targets. We have a net zero target, RA100, EV100, et cetera. Have been recognized as one of the world's most sustainable companies a number of times. But when we really dug into it and looked, 99% of our emissions come from Scope 3. So while we've done a lot to address our own Scope 1 and 2 emissions, for our own business, 99% is in Scope 3, so we really need to look at a way to address that. We've got a commitment to 25% reduction across our value chain by 2030. But we're also, as you can see, our mission is to be the digital partner for sustainability and efficiency for our customers. So there's both our own emissions and our own journey, but also our customer journey as well. And so how are we going to address that at the same time? So speaking to that customer journey, we've engaged many of the largest companies in the world on how do we decarbonize? How do we look at Scope 1 and 2? But more and more, our clients are asking us, how do we look at Scope 3? So we have our own, we have a variety of digital innovations and products to help our customers do that, whether that's, it's really around engaging your suppliers and educating. And so a lot of our initial progress and our initial focus has been on impact. So we want to get the data right, but as we just talked about, there's a lot of challenges in getting that data right. So I'll talk about how PACT is helping us do that within our own footprint, but then also we've looked at, with many of our clients, how do we immediately reduce? How do we get the quickest reductions, which is often in renewable energy solutions? So we've got programs for the pharmaceutical industry, Energize, for the semiconductor industry, Catalyze, where we're saying, how can we engage the combined supply chains of these industries and enable renewable energy solutions through aggregated renewable energy purchasing, through education, through online digital education of these supply chains, which can be wildly varying in terms of their sophistication, right? You got some suppliers that are leaders in the space, you got some who don't even know how to measure a carbon footprint. And so we're really using technology solutions and managed services to help educate those supply chains and try to drive quicker adoption. But what we realized as we started engaging these supply chains, we were really looking at what about a carbon footprint for your whole corporate carbon footprint, you know, just writ large. And many of these suppliers don't even have that, frankly. The majority don't. And so we're really having to help work with them, partner with them to bring them along. But then if you really want to get into how do we mitigate the impact of our products at Schneider, you really need to get a product-specific product carbon footprint, life cycle analysis. So we really want to push our suppliers to go beyond, here's our overall corporate carbon footprint, and say, hey, for the products you're delivering to us, for our supply chain, what's the embedded carbon in those, and how can we work with you to help reduce that? So what we found is there's a major opportunity to do more. There's a big gap in terms of what our suppliers are able to do and what they can do. So the product carbon footprinting and the standard methodology within PACT is a great step on the journey, right? So if we've got a consistent product carbon footprint methodology, we can encourage all of our suppliers. What we found is we really need to partner with a lot of those suppliers. We ran a pilot with I believe 4 of our biggest suppliers that were the most sophisticated, but even they needed help adapting to this product carbon footprint methodology. So we were able to get some good data and some good feedback, but then we realized there's a lot more to do. So it's a great opportunity right now, a big challenge for sure. There's a lot of varying levels of sophistication, but we realize our suppliers really need our support on that journey. The PACT is system is a great step in that journey, and we're excited to be a part of it.
We're having, oh, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And please do take a seat. We'll be sort of having a little discussion now. So I'd ask the other panelists to join us. Daniel, CSO from SAP, John, the CEO of RMI, and of course, Chris from Amazon. Sorry. Perfect. Maybe starting with you, John from RMI. I'm going to really struggle here. You know, you've obviously been involved, sort of taking the more sectorial lens. We've been collaborating for a long time on some of the work in PACT. And I'd love to understand, you know, sort of a little bit from you, why are you getting involved in this sort of work, and what opportunities do you see around getting to more granular data?
Yeah, well, one, there's huge demand for it right now. When you think about the challenge that we have to take carbon out of the real economy, we need to understand where exactly it's being emitted, not by emissions factors, but by actual real hard data that relates to primary data sources. And being able to track and trace that, there are companies, some of them on stage, all the companies on stage have made significant carbon commitments here, right? There are other companies that are similarly trying to make good and do their part to reduce. Increasingly, we're seeing regulations come in play, right? We have certainly the CBAM in Europe and additional product disclosure requirements that are coming forward there. California has just passed a law here, one of the state bills that's going to require disclosure by 2025. We have the SEC coming forward in the US as well with additional rules and requirements. And so there is a real need for us now to understand what exactly is happening within our supply chains, because as you said at the beginning, and as we heard directly from John, somewhere between, you know, kind of 70% and 99% of a company's carbon footprint is outside their direct control. And so we need to have ways of taking the data from throughout the supply chain, standardizing it in interoperable modes, and then using it to propel action forward here so that we can all make better decisions that lead to real economy reductions in carbon, right? That's the challenge that we're trying to solve here, and that's where PACT in particular has helped set up some of the frameworks that are so critical to keep all of us aligned on, are we doing our part and how can we do it better?
Thank you for sharing that, and I'll come to you in a second, Chris. But you mentioned the word interoperability, and I'm sure we have people in the room that were as confused or are as confused as I was when I first heard that word. So Daniel, as our resident techie here, maybe you could explain what is meant by interoperability and how SAP is actually working towards interoperability through PACT.
We need to accept that we are in a unmature situation from all aspects when it comes to standard setting and regulation, when it comes to data availability, data granularity, data accuracy. So we need to establish a model, a framework like you just outlined, where we can reduce the efforts for all, yeah? And that is important because we all love to have our experts focusing on improving the sustainability performance of our companies and not doing all the manual work connecting each other's system with the other one. And that means we need to ensure that this connectivity is embedded directly in the data flows. But let's face it, we will see for the next years to come a hybrid approach, and where in some cases it's good enough to have a spend-based top-down average approach, but where it's really impactful for your own business model, you need accurate, precise data, and there we need to go through that interoperability. It's so difficult for me. So the connection between the various systems in an automated fashion and in a way that all we as stakeholders trust in each other data as they would like to be audited.
Yeah, and you shared a data point earlier with me today around sort of how one of the OEM automotive companies has, was it an Excel sheet with 64,000 data points or tabs? It was incredible, mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is behind the scenes CISO from a big automotive company told me that, and that is how they deal today, with an Excel monster of 64,000 cells to do the carbon product footprint and the corporate footprint. So on both levels, it's incredible. It's a dependency on individuals, on experts, and somehow it's crazy and they understand they can't do it going forward. That is why they greatly engage with us and our new solution portfolio. Yeah, sustainability data exchange, that is the solution we provide, is exactly based on PACT. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that interoperability to be able to actually share the data across different technology solutions, and I think SAP is one of the first to admit that there's going to be many solutions that are used for by different corporates in different ways, and so being able to connect across the value chain is incredibly important. Chris, I'll ask you in a second about sort of the benefits of all of this for some of the pledge signatories. But before we do that, I'd like to pick up on one point that you made, John, earlier today, and really ask about sort of, what you do with the data when you get sort of data up the value chain. What can it be used for, and what's the sort of incentive behind that?
Yeah, I think everything that's been said is right. It's a combination of data, right? You're getting some data where people have measured it very granularly, either in a giant spreadsheet or with the help of software. Many of our suppliers are small, medium enterprise, and they haven't even started looking at data. We've been trying to create easy-to-use solutions for those types of customers. But then I think it is important as data is, and as much as we need to focus on this and make sure we get it right. You mentioned the 40% gap between just using cost-based estimates versus actual primary database estimates, so that it's critical. But then once you have it, what are you going to do with it, right? You actually want to drive reduction. You really need to drive impact, and that's what we're all here for. So, and that's really what the data is enabling, is the ability to drive impact. And so that's one of the things we always focus on with our own business and with our customers is, let's start driving impact today as we get the data better, because the data is going to be a long-term journey. So whatever estimate you have, we know you can use renewable energy. Whatever estimate you have, we know we can educate you on efficiency measures, right? If you're a small, medium enterprise, what are some low-hanging fruits, some ways you can create reduction today, which I think is as important, and I don't want to lower the impact of the data because it's critical, but at the same time, how can we be driving the impact?
Now, I really like that notion of not just data for data's sake, but it's part of a journey and what comes after that. Chris, the Climate Pledge, obviously, we're a big supporter of PACT. Also, you co-convene, or you convene the Climate Pledge. What are some of the sort of things that you're hearing around these challenges from the signatories, and how do you think that can also shape some of the progress that they're making?
Yeah, the common challenges that we've discussed today started with our own kind of understanding of our own footprint. When you think about a company that covers as much surface area as Amazon, understanding our own footprint was a critical part of our journey, right? So 77% of our emissions are in our scope 3, so we're in that range as well. But we built a tech system internally to quantify our scope 1 and 2 emissions that really interconnects with every single part of our business. It processes billions of data points a month to understand how do we translate business activity into carbon that we can then use back as insights to make sure we're making the right business decisions. That ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, right? But the reality is that 77%, the data granularity is just not there. And we think that's a really common challenge. These frameworks are critical. This past year, we have made it clear that we're going to be asking our suppliers to be more transparent about their carbon ambitions, their carbon goals, their progress, and their data. And for a company who has enough suppliers like Amazon, we're really careful about how we make these requests. We do not want to start off another disclosure exercise. We want to kind of kick off and catalyze a decarbonization work. It's not working? Speaking of working. Sorry about that. And so we're really eager as we come forward in 2024. Scope 3 will be the primary focus of our carbon team. And you'll hear some public kind of facing goals and announcements around how we want to mobilize our supply chain. And it really starts with good data that's action oriented. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And John, RMI, obviously very active in this space, coming sort of more also from the industry lens. How are you supporting businesses on this journey, and where do you think you're sort of heading next with this as well?
Yeah, so for us, we are very practical, right? We immediately roll up our sleeves and step in and figure out industries and how exactly to apply in practice and work alongside companies to make that happen. And we started with steel. Very important space where we took the PACT guidance and we went to create PACT compliant implementation data structures and processes, working alongside major players in the steel supply chain, working alongside major players within automotive, specifically to practice, kind of actually getting dirty with the data and leading that data to use toward insight, right? Which ultimately allows you to make the changes to decarbonize. And we went from steel then to aluminum, right? And some of these data structures and approaches are now being pulled into SAP, which we're thrilled with our partnership there to try and create that scalability that allows everyone to take good thinking up top and turn it into practical decision informants as far as business strategies here. And going forward, it's not RMI alone, but we need to work through full supply chains and cover not just aluminum and steel, but get into the chemical space, get into in and across energy, et cetera. The more that we do, though, the easier it gets and the more useful the data becomes. Again, because the goal here isn't to, if we just limit ourselves to emissions factors in the end, we're always going to make the wrong marginal decision somewhere along the way. And so we need to have actual real data that's informed by real assets so that we can phase out the assets that are the most carbon intensive and migrate towards the ones that are least within our supply chains and have real visibility on how to make that happen.
And speaking about the hard-to-abate sectors and some of the materials there, there's a very interesting data point that I learned earlier this week about OEMs. And the OEMs have one single emission factor for nickel. So every single company in the sort of value chain for the automotive industry has the same nickel emissions. I mean, that's crazy. And it's not true, So we obviously, the companies on different maturities in this journey, I'm sure we have different people sort of, going along this journey and starting out or maybe already sharing their product carbon footprints. John, Daniel, what are your sort of, your top 2 tips? How do you actually go about this? What should companies do that are just starting in this space, apart from obviously engage with us?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to start somewhere, right? Start with you want to be as granular as possible, but start with any kind of estimate. Start with some sort of baseline, as Daniel, you shared before, and start looking at ways to reduce. I think materiality assessment of your supply chain is a critical step. which are suppliers we need to focus on, which is the 80-20 crowd, which 20% are giving us 80% of our emissions, and let's directly engage with them. We found that the more dialogue you can have, make it more of a partnership with your suppliers. You can help bring them along the journey. I think we're eventually going to get to a bunch of carrots and sticks here, where it's if you don't, we won't source from you type of things, but that's not where most of the supply chain is right now. So materiality assessment, engaging with those biggest factor suppliers is I think a great place to start.
And Daniel, from your side?
I definitely agree to that, and I would like to add on that the enabling and education piece and the change management piece. So that you, with a very narrow focused approach, like looking as an OEM just on steel. And yes, behind the scenes, the chief system officer of a big automotive company told me, today we are applying in our procurement process averages, and we can't differentiate between a Canadian steel provider or a Chinese steel provider. Think about that. So start there where it's material, impactful, narrow, then engage with a line of business head that they understand they need to embrace the topic and integrated that in their decision-making process. And then from that learning, then you can scale in your company.
And just to carry on from that, I think the learning that we've had internally of our own business operations is a great starting point for how our supply chain can think about theirs. I mean, our own Scope 1 and Scope 2 reductions and pathways are not going to be that dissimilar to what our supply chain is going to need to handle. So I think heads down, understanding your own four walls work and to decarbonize, but also eyes up, and partnership is critical. So the Climate Pledge community, I think, is a great place, and these convening opportunities to understand what are your struggles, and let's talk real, like what's really going on. And you can't do that if you're just focused on your own world. So the partnership, I really can't kind of stress that enough.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, and I think we could talk about partnership and how we're all collaborating for a long time today in many different ways. John, maybe sort of coming to you as the sort of final word on the discussion, and then I'm going to come to all the audience for any questions you might have of the panel or any sort of insights to share. But John, sort of for some of the people who are sort of not working on the corporate side, but more on the sort of partner side and driving some of the progress in this space, what's your word of advice to them?
Yeah, I mean, this is system change, right? In the end, we need to move from an established system to a new one, and that's not always easy. In fact, we have resistant genes within each of us that says change isn't preferred. We like to do what we know. But in this particular case, our planet is depending on us to do something different. And we need to do it together. And it becomes easier when we do it together and we overlay all of our different needs alongside all of our different expertises and think about this as truly an integrated challenge, as truly, when we think about global supply chains, they're interconnected. And this is the mother of interconnected challenges for us to solve. And it's part of the reason that we've had so little progress on Scope 3 historically. But if we're practical, right, and if we take little steps to get the first pieces of data in, to make the first sets of decisions that all lead us and lean us toward the right direction, we can do that. And we can do that better together as we continue to exchange and compare notes and build, kind of the whole set of structures and capabilities and learnings that we need to migrate quickly here to that lower carbon economy.
Thank you for sharing that. And that makes me think of the Jack Johnson song, Better Together. So thank you for that. I'd like to come to the audience now, and we have some mics circulating around. If you could briefly sort of state your company and what you do, and maybe focus on questions or insights and not so much on sort of, what it is that you're sort of doing.
Thank you. There's a great panel. My name is Gavin Starks. I run Icebreaker One. We provide data interoperability across markets, so data sharing is our jam. I think there's one question I've got, which is if you could wave a magic wand today and have one thing happen that would enable all of the things you've been talking about, cognizant of the fact that we have no time, and there's corporate antibodies all over the place saying, no, we can't take change. What's the one thing that you would ask for?
Who would like to take that? John, you look maybe.
Yeah. The one thing that I think, with all respect, Daniel, I know we know carbon is money, but if it were very clear that carbon is money and that we actually had a price signal on it, it would make all of this so much more motivational for everybody to immediately shift, right? And we're not quite to that point, and we have definitely some markets that are. But if we got it to a point where everybody had that signal, I think the data alongside the desire and the corporate genetics the antibodies would be dismissed and genetics would take over and we would simply run through it, right?
That's a great answer. There are some more questions over here, please.
Yeah, hello there. Good afternoon, I think it is. My name is James Dath. I'm the technical lead for data and analytics on the TNFD, Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Another mouthful, an acronym there. Interesting panel. Thank you very much. My question's around cost attribution. So the higher you go up the supply chain, the smaller the entity, and the harder it is for them to gather data and report on it. Where should the costs lie on that data collection? You see in the food and agri sector, for example, 75%, whatever the figure is, of the food that we consume comes from smallholders who don't have the capacity to collect and report data down the supply chain. So where do you see that cost attribution? Thanks.
Yeah, I can take that one. We've, as Schneider ourselves has engaged our supply chain, our top 1,000 suppliers, the vast majority of those are small, medium enterprise, right? There's the long tail. And we find that with all of our clients as well. And we did a lot of engagement of these small, medium enterprise companies to understand what their pain points are. And the big thing was, please don't give us something else to report on. Every customer is asking us to report on something different, et cetera. And please don't make us pay for something, right? So, our technology team created a Zygo Activate platform that was meant to make it very simple for those small, medium enterprise to report high-level data without having to do a ton of work in the background. But the critical innovation or change was it's all set up to show them how it impacts them, how they can save money. So it's all action-oriented. So it's not just another reporting exercise. Tick the box, do this reporting exercise. And then what we found is these big companies like Schneider ourselves or like PepsiCo or like all these other folks that we're engaged with, maybe they can sponsor some of these for their small, medium enterprise, right? Instead of making each of those small, medium enterprise companies pay for a Zygo Activate license, as inexpensive as that may be, why doesn't the sponsor pay for a big chunk of those to help really push and enable those small, medium enterprise? So to your question about who should pay for it, it'd be great if every little company could do this on their own, but we know that's not the case. And so if you as a larger company that's got strong Scope 3 goals, if you want to go above and beyond, I think there's more that sponsor company can do to help support.
But it's beautiful to see, in particular, how we observe the adoption in the market when it comes to our solutions. Many great examples from the smaller sized business entities. They see it as a competitive advantage for them, fulfilling the expectations of the bigger companies being their customers.
Thank you. There was another question over here.
Hi there. My name is Roseline. I'm the Net Zero and Emissions Manager at University of Aberdeen, so quite a different part here. But from the consumer side, we know procurement is our biggest emission source, and the biggest emission source is technologies, whether that's computers or MRIs. And obviously, all of these pieces of kit have a data sheet that comes with it, tells you operating temperatures, energy consumption, it tells you everything. At what state is the supply chain at to be able to add carbon, generated carbon? So this is how much carbon was generated from making this bit of kit. Because I think that would be the next step for consumers. And when we are trying to purchase like bits of Schneider kit, we've got quite a few on site, we want to be able to go, this only generated 5 tons of carbon to make it, and we compare it to another bit of kit that says 10 tons. We're obviously going to go with Schneider because we have to report procurement emissions now.
I think, maybe this, Andy, you can speak to this too, but I think this is what the product carbon footprint in the pact is meant to get at, right? Can we get some standardized metrics around how you measure a product carbon footprint to compare apples to apples across industries. And we're definitely not there yet. We're pushing for that. We're a part of this for a reason. And we would love that too, because we're really doing everything we can to decarbonize that supply chain and value chain. And if that could be really clearly seen by consumers and then provide a competitive advantage for us, that would be huge.
Yeah, I'll just add that this isn't a one-way conversation. We hope that you do business on AWS's cloud, for example, which is now powered by over 90% renewable energies. We have a great Scope 2 story that actually is a reduced Scope 3 emissions for you all who can consume our services. So I think the more we can help tell our story uniformly, that will reduce the cost of this disclosure conversation. But I think that's where we need to go, absolutely, is having a way to tell you the good work that is being done to decarbonize. Otherwise, without these standard platforms, there is no natural way for us to have that kind of B2B relationship.
Okay, one more question here at the front, and then maybe there's somebody on the right-hand side. Yeah, I can see that one. So we have time for 2 more questions, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that great panel. Florence, CTO of Optel Group, leader in traceability within supply chain. Our product is PACT compliant as well, and we are seeing several of our clients pushing back on CBAM. I would like to get your view on that. Are you promoter of CBAM?
It's a very tough question. No takers. Anyone?
Well, I mean, we need to have some way, again, of pricing carbon in the end. Ideally, you have, rather than a border adjustment mechanism, you have a global standard that's set so that individual regions or individual countries don't wind up creating their own exchange mechanisms. That said, if we don't all move together, then you're starting to penalize and differentiate industries. And so this is about harmonization globally and making sure that there aren't places that we're leaking carbon out in different parts of the world by not having harmonized regulation. So whether it's CBAM or whether it's other mechanisms, we need to harmonize in order to make sure that we don't have elsewhere emissions popping up someplace else in the world that still heat the world in the same way.
Thank you for taking that, John. We have one final question here.
Hi, my name is Aslesha. I'm a climate lead specialist at Novozymes. I have a question around product carbon footprint methodologies and the need for the standardization of that. We often reach out to our suppliers to collect that data, but they have different methodologies. It's not comparable. It's very difficult to use it. And just building on that, what do you think is the role of the governments in actually helping and enabling the private sector to standardize these methodologies in the right time, because we don't have time? Just wanted to get your views on kind of this. Thank you.
They should definitely listen to you, because that is needed. And what a nonsense, what a huge duplication of efforts everywhere if these standards are not harmonized, but as well not defined in a way that it should not lead to different interpretation. Today we have the situation that if you ask auditor A, you get answer A, and if you ask another auditor, they might answer that question with B, and that is not helpful. So harmonization, but as well having it on a level where it's clear how to apply it, that is needed. That is as well for PACT a foundational success factor, and we need to encourage the policymakers to agree on that. And I'm quite optimistic when it comes to ISSB as an example, the greenhouse gas protocol being more on a detailed level. And put yourself in our shoes. How should we provide standard software if the standard is not clear?
I think it's a really great point. And coming back a little bit to what I was saying at the beginning about some of the work that WBCSD is doing to harmonize how the system works together, how the standard setters like the Greenhouse Gas Protocol that we co-convene work with an SBTI, work with an ISSB, but then also not forgetting the policymakers in that conversation. So we also spend, that's why we're at COP, to engage with the policymakers. We, go sort of talking to the US governments, the European governments, and also across Asia. So there is a big role to play, but it has to be practical for business. So we're sort of running out of time, and I'd like to thank all of you for all your great questions. That's been really helpful to sort of bring the conversation to an end. Like I said, we're going to ask you to share your sort of key takeaways. So please, think about your key takeaway and write those on your cards. If you'd like to add your company or your industry, do, but you don't have to. And if there are any questions, sort of things burning on your mind that you'd like us to sort of go and look at, please also do write those, because we collect all of these. We've been doing this over the last couple of days, and it's really helpful to bring that back and really understand how we can help everyone here in the room to progress on this topic. But I'd like to close us out with obviously a big thank you to the Climate Pledge and all the speakers here today, as well as Cecilia from my team that's back there. Give everyone a wave. And Grayson, who've been really good in organizing this panel. And we'll be around a little bit to catch up with all of you after this discussion. But for me, there's a couple of key points I wanted to pull out here. I think that focus on the material impact flows, to not get overwhelmed with the majority of how much data points you need and you have to work towards, but to really focus on what's material and to get started. I think that was a really valuable point that you made. And also the engagement. This is an opportunity, and it's also a responsibility to work with your value chains and to unlock those value opportunities and to help them understand what they can actually stand to gain if they're going towards more granular data. And to actually also learn from the value chains. I think that was really, really great. And the role of partnership, and we very purposefully brought together different partners on stage here today. And that's not just to sort of impress all of you, that's because that's how we run this work. Partnership and everyone collaborating, and as you can see many other collaborators in the room, it's fundamental to cracking the product carbon footprint challenge. So I want to thank all of you for working together on this mother of all interconnected challenges. John, you've delivered me with great quotes today, so thank you for that. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and let's give everyone a big round of applause. Thank you. Chris, any final words from your side? And if you'd like to find out more, there's also a QR code to scan.
I think you said it well. At the Climate Pledge, we're just excited to have these partnership convening conversations. So if you're not part of the Climate Pledge, you should join. So we have all the same net zero target to work backwards from. So thank you.